What's up YouTube, Mellow SMS here. As you can see from hands, we are back with the deck profile today. So, I know this is one I promised a few weeks back, but IRL happened and things got delayed. But we are back with standard. And here we have... Ta-da! We have Granfia. So, for those who don't know what Granfia is a deck that's all based around having plant tokens, and then turning those plant tokens into a Noblesse Rose token. And then that Noblesse Rose token can be utilised for massive power to boost the Vanguard, whilst also then using that gauge that it generates to power up rearguards, so you can get some nice interesting plays out of it. But let's get started with the ride line. So first part of the ride line is our lovely grade 0 in the kind lordling Granfia. So, usual starter skill, when this is rode upon, if you went second, you draw a card. That's not going to be changing this format anytime soon. So, next one up is our grade 1 in the future suzerain Granfia. Now, this Granfia's got the skill of, when this unit is rode upon by a genius wise wolf Granfia, you may call a plant token to rearguard circle. So obviously plant tokens, I'm just going to grab one here for an example, are basic 5k grade 0s, they have boost, they do nothing else. Very simple, nice and self-explanatory. But they get used throughout a lot of the deck, so plant tokens are a very interesting mechanic to enable. Especially when we go into our grade 2, which is the Genius Wiser Wolf Granfia. So this Granfia's got the skill of, if you have a rearguard, if your rearguard has a plant token, and your soul has the future suzerain Granfia, so the grade 1, you may then a grade 3 card with Granfia in its card name in your ride deck can be rode without discarding a card from your hand. So the ride line works on you're getting a +1 from your grade 1 Granfia, which then turns into you not having to minus with your grade 2 Granfia when you choose to ride up. So really interesting. But let's look into the current grade 3 Granfia, and that is the Lavian Lord Granfia. So Lavian Lord Granfia has got two different skills. First one being, act Vanguard Circle once a turn, you can Soul Blast 1, and all your plant tokens on your rearguard circle become plant gauge. Call a Noblesse token to your back row center rearguard circle, and put all of your plant gauges onto that unit. And his second skill is Auto Vanguard Circle. At the end of the battle this unit attacked, you can put one or more up to a total of 5 Noblesse Rose tokens or plant gauge into your drop zone. You then choose one of your rear guards and it gets 5,000 power for each card put into your drop zone. If you then put 3 or more cards into your drop zone, you then stand that unit on top. So first skill is allowing us to turn our army of rear guards into the Noblesse Rose token that we were talking about earlier. And this then generates really nice card abilities, because I can't show you the Noblesse Rose directly, but I'll show you it on the screen. The Noblesse Rose gains 5,000 power for each plant gauge attached to it. And then when you would actually use that, when you would want to retire rear guards for costs, you may use plant gauge instead. So really nice mechanic. You're generating a lot of plus in the deck, creating really big Vanguard numbers, and then turning that into a really big rearguard. I do want to first off stress that doing this with the Momoke token does not work, as it does not see the rearguards being retired. This has been ruled by Bushiroad Japan, so Noblesse Rose token does not work with the Momoke token. So those that would want to do a Roroa ride line, because Roroa does generate plant tokens as well, so it is an alternative option. You can't use the Radlina to make the Momoke and then have the Momoke eat the Noblesse Rose tokens at a later stage. You can retire the Noblesse Rose itself to gain 5k, but any plant gauge you retire would not count towards the Momoke boost. But then you obviously got his second skill, which obviously, as we said, turns the Noblesse plant gauge that we've been generating into a very big rear guard to then restand and swing with it. So we're getting our multi-attack within the deck. Because we don't have generic multi-attack within the deck outside of Granfia's ability. But that's it for the Radland. Let's move into the rest of the grade 3s. So the first up for the remaining grade 3s is we've obviously got our 3 extra copies of our Lavian Lord Granfia. So obviously Persona Ride's really good for the deck. It generates some nice big numbers. And why would we not? It's extra draw power for the deck. Next one up is our backup grade 3 for the rear guards, and this is going to be an interesting one because we've gone for a nice little common card called Burst Peas. So Burst Peas have got the skill of auto rear guard circle once a turn. When this unit attacks, you can count blast 1 and retire a plant token, and then this unit gets 10,000 power until end of turn. So this is really nice because obviously it turns our rear guard into a beta from the get-go, because obviously this would be our ideal restand target. So we're swinging in first, this would be 23k, plus if you decide to boost with it, you can boost with it. Then Granfia restands it with 25k boost on top, and swings again. Because the power it gains from its own skill does last till end of turn, so really nice to work with there. And it's budget on top of that, because this is a common. So really, really good common from the same set as our Lavian Lord Granfia. So if you're buying boxes of this set, for example, pulling both of these should be fairly easy to do. And our final grade 3 is a copy of Gratius Gradule. So Gratius Gradule says if we've not rode a grade 3, we can activate this to then activate Persona Ride. So you'd get the draw, you get the 10k to your front row, but you can only use one of the, what's the exact words they use? The Regalis piece. So you can only have one Regalis piece in your deck, and you can only activate one of them per game. So even if you somehow, like with Zorga, where you can activate orders from the drop zone, you can't do this more than once. If you do want to cut down on the budget for this deck, because I will be blunt, Granfia is a very budget-based deck, and if Gratius Gradule is just a little bit too much out of your price range, you can easily turn it into a 4th copy of Burst Peas. And then you get more value out of your deck. Because, yes, this isn't a important card, but it's still a very nice card to have, and this is an easy swap to make. But let's move on to our grade 2. And no, I did not stutter when I said grade 2, because we only run 4 copies of Granfia's support card, which is the Ran Orangine. So Orangine's got the skill of, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, you may call a plant token to rearguard circle for free, which is really interesting. But he's then got the second skill of auto front row rearguard circle. At the beginning of your battle phase, if you've got a Vanguard with Granfia in its card name, you may call a plant token to rearguard circle. So this accelerates the aggression of an already aggro deck even further, because having 2 of these on the board gives you 4 plant tokens at once. So grade 3 turns really nice, but it's not grade restricted. So say for example I put one of the Orangines down on turn 2. We've got the 15k Vanguard column if we chose to put the plant token there, or we can put it to one of the sides, call down our Orangine, which makes a plant token in front of that plant token to make a 10k column, and then start the battle phase, Orangine makes another plant token. So we've got 2 10k columns and a 15k column on turn 2, and used no Count Blast and no Soul Blast. Really good aggro for the deck. Well, let's move on to these grade 1s. So, obvious first one for the grade 1s is going to be our usual 4 copies of our Perfect Guards. So obviously I've gone for 1 Sanctitude and 3 normal Perfect Guards here. But you can easily go, if you want to keep the budget down and don't want to pay for a Sanctitude, swap it down to 4 copies of Planar Prevent Dragon or the other one, which is Custodial Dragon. Either one works. They both do the exact same skill. If you really wanted to keep the budget even lower, you can even just run 4 Trial Deck Perfect Guards. They really don't make too much of a difference. And if you're really working on a budget, the Trial Deck Perfect Guards can be just as good. Next up is the expensive grade 1 of the deck, which can also be replaced as well. And that is 4 copies of our Performing Petal Diantha. So Diantha's got 2 skills. First one being, also when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, if you've got a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can Counterblast 1, choose a grade 3 or less card from your drop zone and call it to the Rearguard Circle. And second skill is Continuous Rearguard Circle. During your turn, if you have 2 or more grade 1 or less units in your Rearguards in your back row, this unit gets 5,000 power. So I do want to stress that obviously not everyone may have the fully erratted version, because she does have the, doesn't say fully that it needs to be grade 1 or less in the back row. So you do need to pay attention to that very carefully. But she's really good recursion in the deck with stuff like Ran Orangine, for example, or our Koro Mushrooms, or Burrow Mushrooms as it's called in English. So being able to recur those is very nice. But obviously, we're just generating a +1 at that point. For other options you can go instead of Diantha, I've got 2 options for you. First one is the Adhesive Mutant Actia Sticky. Now this has got the skill of you can Counterblast 1 and retire 2 Rearguards to draw a card and it gains +5k. So it regains the same level of power, but you can then turn 2 Plant Gauge into an actual draw card. And with how much you actually generate Plant Gauge, it can be done quite actively over a multitude of turns. The other option is the new Granfia promo that's recently come out, which if you've picked it up from locals, you can do it very nicely. It's start your battle phase, you generate a plant token, and if your Vanguard's a grade 3 Granfia, you can Counterblast 1 to draw a card. So again, more hand generation, but this time you're actually generating a plant token instead of Actia Sticky removing the plant tokens. I don't actually have the Durian promo yet, so that's why I've gone with Diantha. But the moment I actually get my Durians, these will instantly become Durian just for the fact of its extra draw power for the deck, and you're generating extra plant tokens. So all in all, really nice card. Next grade 1 up is one we've mentioned a little bit briefly, and this is the Burrow Mushrooms. So Burrow Mushrooms has got the skill of Act, put this card into your soul. Call up to 2 plant tokens to Rearguard Circle, and then if you've got a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Granfia in its card name, choose one of your Rearguards and it gets power +5,000 until end of turn. So, free plant generation for generating a soul and giving power? Why is this card so good and so generic? Because I know decks like Zorga like to run this card, but the fact of it generates 2 plants that they can then call over the Roaming Prison Dragons, and then the Roaming Prison Dragons are in the right spots for them to go with. But obviously we get that extra bonus of we're giving a 5k buff to whatever we're going to restand with our grade 3 Granfia. So again, we're providing more aggression to our already aggressive deck, which is really good. And then we're moving on to our next grade 1, which coincides quite nicely with the Burrow Mushrooms, in the Farming Pumpkin. So Farming Pumpkin's got the skill of Act Rearguard Circle once a turn. If you've got a Vanguard with Granfia in its card name, you can Soul Blast 1 and call a plant token to Rearguard Circle. If your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you call 2 plant tokens instead of 1. So this is really nice because obviously you can use your Burrow Mushrooms, put it into Soul on your grade 3 turn, generate 2 plant gauge for your Noblesse Rose token, and then use Farming Pumpkin to Soul Blast out that same Burrow Mushrooms and generate 2 more plant gauge for your Noblesse Rose token. And this doesn't retire itself, so this can obviously be done every single turn, which is really nice to have for generating a consistent plant gauge, because obviously you're sacrificing 5 plant gauge every turn, so having this generate 2, the Orangine generating 2 every turn, that gives us 4 every single turn. If we've also sacrificed the Noblesse Rose and making it back in again, we're getting a total of 5 plant gauge every turn for the cost of Soul Blast 2. Well, I say 5 plant gauge, it's 4 plant gauge and the Noblesse Rose. But then you obviously, with combining with the mushrooms, you can keep that plant gauge up very nicely, which is very good for the deck. And then for our final card, which makes up for obviously us wanting to cut the Diantha, is 3 copies of In the Dim Darkness, the Frozen Resentment. So this has got the skill of being able to be played with cost of Soul Blast 1. You then look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose one of those cards and send it to the drop zone. Then you choose a card from your drop zone and call it to rearguard circle. Then you must shuffle your deck. Not me. You've looked at your deck. You've got to shuffle it. So really nice card for more recursion in the deck. You're also compressing the deck at the same time, and we've got a budget option for if this is too far out your price range. Because obviously, Dim Darkness Frozen Resentment's going up in price for the fact of Zorga's about to become mass popular due to masks. It's utilised really nicely in Magnolia, and Flagberg, and Maelstrom. So if you want an alternative option for a bit more budget, is you could be looking at Spiritual Body Condensation. It's got the same Soul Blast 1 cost, but instead of actually checking top 5 to mill 1, you're resurrecting straight from the drop zone, but that card you're resurrecting gains plus 5k. So if you use this as your focus for, oh, this is going to be my restand target, that's getting even more power on the board. Plus, half the time, you can actually Soul Blast a Burrow Mushrooms that you've tucked into your Soul, bring back the Burrow Mushrooms, and then just tuck it back in Soul again for 2 more plant gauge. So, makes the order turn into, on activation, make 2 plant gauge, which really isn't bad. Plus, you actually get the compression if you go for this one, but so that play more works better if you're on Frozen Resentment over Spiritual Body, because obviously Spiritual Body you're then sacrificing the plus 5k. But let's move to our triggers. So starting off, obviously we've got our over trigger, and we're going to go for Blessed Favor because it's Blessed Favor. Getting the ability to crit, draw, front, and heal when we offensively check it is really good and never going to change. With the new over triggers we've got coming in the future sets, you may want to try out the blue one, but the red one really doesn't do too much. Then next trigger up is we run 7 copies of critical triggers. I've got effect criticals here, but I will stress very heavily, these are nowhere near mandatory for the deck. You do not go through that near enough soul. The plus 2k doesn't make enough of a difference in this deck. You can literally run 7 vanilla triggers and you'd be absolutely fine. The effect trigger that does, however, become important is our next one, and that is we have gone for 4 copies of the Serene Maiden Lena. So the reason why this effect trigger is important because the fact we're actually gaining an extra 5k shield. So being able to draw cards when we check it on triggers, but also being a 10k shield is very nice to have. Didn't go for fronts for the fact that obviously we are still fairly piece reliant, but we're not focusing too hardly on the shield in the deck because we're planning to win the game as fast as possible. So having the extra draws to dig for the extra pieces, especially in retire heavy matchups, does come out quite a lot. Then our last trigger is the obvious one of heal triggers. And I've gone for 3 copies of normal heal triggers. So for us it's Petronella, because I like the World Original Art. But then we've gone for 1 copy of the Alchemic Hedgehog. So Alchemic Hedgehog gains his additional 15k shield for if you're being attacked by a unit that's got a critical of 2 or more, but the critical's got to have come from outside of a trigger. This does not include Gal Mage Held's effect to give the Vanguard a trigger for the rest of the game, because that is actually seen as a effect trigger, not an actual critical trigger. So 25k shield, because obviously the effect heals do have 10k base, not an actual 15k base. But 25k, which we can chuck down against Roaming Prison Dragon to 1 card guard it. We've got Gandiva coming out. This works against obviously Obstacle Day, the grade 3 one, because he generates a crit. It does have its uses really nicely in the format. Moving on to the Festival Collection format, when that comes around, you may want to swap to the Restand heals if Willista is really popular in your meta. But these counter heals are really only going to be used depending on the meta that you're playing in. If your locals is literally Magnolias and all the stuff like that that doesn't actually do stuff that gets countered by the heals, you don't go into it. Obviously, if you're in a grade 4 heavy Jet, Messiah, that kind of stuff meta, you can easily swap to the grade 4 heal that does become a 20k shield if your opponent's Vanguard grade is higher than yours. But that comes down to personal preference overall with guarding the heals. You can easily just go to 4 normal heals and be absolutely fine as well. But that's it for the deck. Let's just quickly show a quick turn 3 play. Alright, and here we are with our basic setup. So as you can see from here, we've obviously got our Orangine. We're about to go into our grade 3 turn. Oops, I've got the damage the wrong way around. As you can see here, we've got a really nice hand to work off of. So, I'm going to just leave this down here so people can actually see my hand a bit better. But let's get started. We draw for turn. We draw another piece. But then we've obviously got Granfia's skill, because obviously we've got our plant token. We can grab our ride deck and ride up for free. Slide up to get a bit more space. Hee. Then obviously we'll activate Granfia's skill straight away. So we're going to Soul Blast out the starter. And turn all this into Plant Gauge for our Noblesse Rose token. Now I actually haven't got a Noblesse Rose token yet, because mine's not arrived, so I'm going to be making it into a basic card. And we're going to be using dice to represent for the fact of I haven't got enough plant tokens yet. It is on my to-do list. I know, I'm lazy. I'm going to be ordering it. I've got to order a lot, is the thing. Because this deck does generate a very huge amount of plant gauge. So obviously we're sitting at 3 now. Going to call down our Burst Peas, because obviously he's going to be our main attacker. We're then going to call down Burrow Mushrooms, using its skill. Put it into Soul. And we then increase our plant gauge, so we go up to 5. And because we are a grade 3 Granfia, we can choose our Burst Peas and give him 5,000 power. Then obviously Farming Pumpkin skill next. We're going to Soul Blast out our Burrow Mushrooms and make 2 more plant gauge. So obviously now we're sitting at 7 plant gauge. And as you can see from our hand here, we really can't do much more. So we're going to enter our battle phase and obviously start the battle phase. The round Orangine lets us make another plant token. And then we start swinging. So we start off with this. Use his skill to Cat plus 1. And sacrifice one of our plant gauge to gain an additional 15,000 power. So obviously we're now swinging in 28k, which is a really nice number. We then swing in with this next, which is 13. Plus this is now a 40k booster. So this is a 53k swing. So obviously Twin Drive, we get first check of a Granfia, second check of a Diantha. So we're not doing the best hand-wise. But we've got Perfect Guard, we've got Shield. We can make do with the turn, so we'd get to our 4th turn. But then end of that, we take away 1 plus 4 makes 5 to give plus 5 and the extra 20. And then, because obviously we retired 3 or more, we restand our Burst Peas. And then we'd obviously use RNG to take out one of our opponent's rear guards, just so they can't intercept with it, for example. Because obviously 10k, if we're against a 13k Vanguard, it's not going to hit. But then we swing in finally up with the Farming Pumpkin, boosting this for 21, 41, 61k. So really big numbers. And that's the simpleness of how a Grade 3 Granfia turn goes. It's not flashy, it's nice and simple, but it's still really fun from the get-go. But that's going to be it for this video. If you haven't done so already, please do like and subscribe. It very much does help the channel. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye!